It's Wednesday. That means it's time for another video edition of Widower Wednesday. I'm Abel Keogh, author of the book Dating a Widower, and today we're going to discuss how you can stop comparing yourself to the late wife. This is a big challenge I see on my Facebook group, I see in emails and coaching sessions that I do. It's a big issue. It's a very human thing too. So if you find yourself, comparing yourself to the late wife and feeling inadequate, it's okay. It's normal to do that. We're actually going to talk about four things that you should know and do that can kind of help you overcome this comparison and realize that the late wife was, just as human as you, and also to realize that odds are the widower is not comparing you, at least not in the way that you're comparing yourself to the late wife, and things like that. So let's get going. Hey, so first thing to know is that when someone dies, they become a saint, and it doesn't matter how awful they were in real life or all the bad things they did. It's just human nature to put these people up on a pedestal and just talk about good things about them. And so don't think that people are being mean to you or something like that when they just talk about good things about the late wife. It's just kind of human nature, and that's just kind of the way things are. Let me give you a personal example. So, for those who know my story, my late wife, Krista, she killed herself when she was 7 months pregnant. And the last 2 months of our marriage, they were awful. In every sense, it was an awful, horrible experience, probably for both of us. Yet, when you ask people or you ask me about Krista, we're going to tend to skip over the fact that she killed herself when she was pregnant, or maybe kind of all the bad things about her, or some of the things she said or might have done, and we tend to focus on the good memories and the good times. And again, that's human nature, but when you're dating a widower, that makes it hard because you feel like you're competing against a saint. For example, Julie often felt like she was competing with a saint, when we were dating, because, people would say nice things about Krista, and she realized, well, I'm here making mistakes, even though she's trying to do her best, and, how can I compete with someone who people remember as being perfect? So let's get into maybe 4 things that will help in this comparison. It's not healthy, by the way. It is normal. It is normal to compare yourself, but it's not healthy to kind of dwell on it and obsess about it. So here's 4 things I think that can kind of help you with this comparison. So the first is to understand that most widowers, they remarry someone who is very different than the late wife. You can look at me and Julie, but if you want to see other examples, in my book, The Ultimate Dating Guide for Widowers, I talk about 4 widowers in there, some who have moved on better than others. But in all 4 cases, if you look at Joe Biden, Thomas Edison, Paul McCartney, and Pierce Brosnan, they ended up with women who were very different than their late wife. And I think, especially if you read the story of Thomas Edison, and you can see just how different his late wife was. I mean, different in just about every way than his late wife, and the other ones were different as well. But I think he has the most striking example. So anyway, you can go, but just realize that when widowers remarry, the person they remarry is usually very different, and that's not a bad thing. I think as you get older and you find yourself at a different stage in life, you tend to look for things that you didn't look for when you were younger, or care about things that maybe you didn't care about when you were younger, or not care about things, for example. And I think they're a little more open to that. So, I do encourage you to read The Ultimate Dating Guide for Widowers. There's also a chapter in there that talks about really what people should be looking for. But again, widowers, they get together usually with someone who's vastly different, and that's not a bad thing. And they don't do it because they think you're better or worse than the late wife. It's just that tastes and opinions and things like that change. And really what you're looking for is core values. That's usually what widowers are looking for. They're not looking for, well, do you have the same sense of humor? Do you cook the same way? Do you do this? There's a lot of superficial things I think that we compare ourselves with when we're thinking of others. And we're not thinking about, or when you compare yourself to the late wife, it's a lot of these superficial things. That's not the things that widowers are interested in. So read The Ultimate Dating Guide for Widowers. I think it gets into some widower psychology, and you can see how these famous people like Thomas Edison and Joe Biden and Paul McCartney kind of thought and went through this process of remarrying, what they really looked for. And you can kind of see it's very different probably than the issues that you're comparing yourself with. Second thing to understand is that most of the comparisons, it's in your head. Do widowers compare you to the late wife in a way? Yes, they do, but it's not the comparison that I like this better, or I like the way she did this better. It's really a comparison that, oh, this is different, and there's always that adjustment period of widowers trying to figure out, oh, I need to communicate to this person in a different way. I need to speak to her in a different way. They aren't comparing them like what they like better. They're just trying to, oh, this is different, and that's really how they're comparing them. So at least if they're ready to move on, I do know that if widowers are comparing you in an unhealthy way, like asking you to wear certain things or do certain things, or they're saying, if they actually come out and say, well, the late wife did it this way, and you should be more like the late wife, or hey, the late wife wore her hair this way, why don't you do that? Or if they're really trying to get you to mold you into kind of a clone of the late wife, that's a red flag. But most of the time they're just trying, it's more of a comparison that it's different. So for example, when I was dating Julie, obviously she has a different personality and a lot of different interests than what Krista did, and so my comparison was, oh, it wasn't like I like this better or I like this worse. It was like, this is different. And that's how most men compare. And by the way, the comparison lasts about 5 seconds and then they just move on to something else. They don't sit there and obsess about it and do things like that, at least if they're ready to move on. So just kind of keep that in mind, is that, most of this comparison is in your head, and the widowers, they aren't comparing you this way. They aren't comparing you to the late wife in the way that you're doing it. They're just really going through a checklist of, can I live with this kind of thing, or this is different, that's cool, or maybe they like things better or worse, but they're not obsessing over it, that just how different or better or worse that the two of you are. The third thing you can do is you need to build your confidence by knowing your unique value and worth. There's actually an entire chapter in the second edition of Dating a Widower about this, so I encourage you to read that. But in short, don't let others, like the widower, his kids, or his family, or his former in-laws, define your self-worth for you. You need to know who you are, what you value, what you bring to the table, and what makes you special and unique. And if others can't see that, like if his kids can't see that, or even he can't see it, it's their problem and it's their loss. You just need to understand that you are who you are, and the widower and it's basically all that matters is, can the widower accept you for who you are? If he can, then great. You can have a long relationship. If he can't, then it's probably time to move on and find someone who can accept you for who you are. When it comes to the opinions of others, usually if they're verbally comparing you or things like that, it's their own grief showing through. They're just being stupid. But really what you need to do is really understand, this is who I am, this is what makes me unique and wonderful, and if others can't see it, it's kind of their problem. So I know it's easier said than done, but just understand that you're unique and you're valuable, and you are who you are, and you need to find somebody, widower or otherwise, who can appreciate you and live with you and love you for who you are, not for who you aren't. And finally, if your confidence is struggling, I think most women, when they go into a relationship with a widower, at least this is the way it is on coaching sessions, most of them, they're very, they've achieved a lot, whether in the workforce or home, and they actually have good self-confidence, but they start dating a widower and their confidence kind of takes a beating, just because of, it could be their own mental comparisons, or it could be something that the widower or his family or his kids are doing. But the best thing you can do is just fake it until you make it, and just fake confidence. No one will be able to tell that you're faking it. Trust me, the widower won't be able to go in there and say, hey, I think she's faking confidence. No, the widower won't be able to tell that. But if you exude confidence, widowers actually find that attractive. And if you exude confidence, even if you don't feel confident, if you can fake that confidence, the thing is that actually makes you more attractive, and it actually makes the widower take more interest in you and decide faster, actually, if he really feels like he wants a relationship with you. It's when you don't have confidence, that's when widowers who are just out there looking for companionship, that's what they latch on to. So you need to go ahead and fake that confidence. And again, I know probably easier said than done, but trust me, the widower won't be able to know that you're faking confidence. I know when Julie and I were dating, she had several periods of time where she wasn't confident in herself, again, because of comparisons and other things, but she faked it she faked it really good, and I couldn't tell. She always exuded this confidence that she cared about who she was, and she knew her unique value and worth. And because of that, it really made me respect her more, but it also put me on the path of, if I'm going to be worthy of such a woman, if I really want to spend the rest of my life with Julie, then I really have to, she's not going to change for me. I've got to accept her for who she is. So most widowers, again, if they're ready to move on, will like that. If you find yourself in a relationship where your confidence is taking a constant beating, there might be bigger issues there, and it's probably a good thing to go ahead and reevaluate the relationship. So again, sum it up, just keep in mind that widowers, they generally get together or remarry someone who's vastly different than the late wife. So it's a good thing if you're very different than the late wife. Just understand that, again, that most of the comparison is in your head, and the widower isn't thinking about the comparisons in the same way you are. Just, again, know your unique value and worth, because that's important to understand that, you are who you are, and you shouldn't have to change for someone to love you. And again, if you're struggling with this, just fake it. The widower won't be able to tell, and you'll see a big difference in how he treats and respects you when you feel confident, or even if you're faking it, about yourself. Hope it was helpful. Leave your comments or suggestions in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe. I'm Abel Keogh, author of the book Dating a Widower. I'll also feel free to schedule a coaching session if you want, and I will see you next Wednesday.